Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Grow Wealthy Grooming. My name is River Lee, and I am the founder of the Savvy Groomer, where I teach you to go from being burnt out, broken to healthy, wealthy, and happy, building a grooming business on your terms. So let's go ahead and hop into today's topic. Planning for the unknown. So I did want to say that my thoughts and prayers are with anyone who has been dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Ian or any other past or future victims of other natural disasters. So first and foremost, the most important thing that you need to know when planning for the unknown is to be prepared. So we're going to do the following tips that the Small Business Association suggests. So what they suggest is first step one, you have to assess your risk. So know which natural disasters could affect your business. So common hazards include things like power outages, hail, fires, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, wildfires, flooding, etc. If you're not sure which kind of disaster is likely to happen in your area, what I actually suggest doing is to ask people that have been in your community for 10, 20, 30, or 40 years plus. They will have some amazing stories of either when they were kids or something that's happened in the past couple of decades. So personally, in my area, everyone talks about the blizzard of 78, where kids were stuck at schools, cars were abandoned on the highway, and people ended up jumping out of their second-story windows into the snow because literally the first level of their houses, or if they were in ranches, was just completely covered in snow. There was over 10 feet of snow that happened in a single blizzard. Then, of course, snow drifts. You get the picture, right? And so I remember growing up in this area and being told all about this blizzard of 78. Now, this happened before I was born, so I obviously don't have any firsthand stories of it, but I always grew up knowing that a blizzard could happen of this level and magnitude. And if you're in my area, then you know that if there is any kind of snow that's coming, there's no bread, milk, or eggs in the grocery store. Now, why anybody would buy those things before a blizzard, I'm not really sure, but I think it's just out of habit at this point. But it is because of those things. And so if you grew up in an area where that happened, or if you talk to other parents or other people in your community who have been in that area, they're going to tell you those stories. Another thing that happened in my personal area was almost 100 years ago, there was this massive hurricane that literally wiped an entire theme park off of a boardwalk. The water came in and it just completely demolished that entire area. And it's so interesting because my grandparents would talk about going to this carnival and they'd be like, oh, this theme park? And I'd be like, oh, where's this theme park? And they're like, oh, that got washed away. And so you can learn about your local history, which is both fun, entertaining, and it also gives you an insight into what could potentially happen. And again, you can either enjoy those fun trips down memory lanes with people that are older in your community, but you can always, of course, go through old newspaper clippings. You can start doing your own data research. But I think especially with these kinds of situations, because the way the news outlets were, even 30, 40 years ago, it's always better to know from someone who was firsthand what it was like. And I think we're seeing that now with social media, where it's really helpful to see someone in their living room floating, in a dinghy, because when you think about it, I would have never even thought, oh my God, yes, if the water is that high where you're almost to the living room ceiling, we're now with technology seeing that side of these experiences. So I think that's really important. And by the way, speaking of statistics, did you guys know that 25% of businesses that are affected by these disasters will never open again? that is 1 in 4. So that's really important for you to be aware of what those are, because if I had a 1 in 4 potential of never opening again, that's important. Okay. Then we're going to move into step 2, which is to create a plan. So the SBA has actually a ton of amazing checklists and safety tips on their website. And you can check those out at the IRS guide for preparing your business for a disaster, as well as at the Federal Management Agency, which is FEMA. They have an emergency preparedness checklist and toolkit. Some common themes of disaster planning, including preparing before, during, and after the disaster. And I highly suggest that you start checking out these lists now. And again, this can be both in your personal life as well as in your business life, right? It is creating those plans. Now, there are other grooming business coaches that do have these kinds of plans, and I highly suggest you check them out. That you check out things that are designed specifically for grooming businesses, because there's never a bad side to being prepared, right? And then step 3 is to execute your plan. So this last part of planning the unknown, but certainly, one of the most important. You want to make sure you practice your plan with your staff so that everyone's prepared should a disaster actually happen. So you're like, okay, so I get it. I need to have a plan. I need to know how to execute it. And I need to know what potential problems can happen. And then I know I need to practice it, right? So that's the physical side of preparing for a natural disaster. But what about the business side? What about the financial side of preparing my business for all of these? Well, I'm going to give you guys quick 6 tips of things that you need to calculate so that you can start thinking about what it is potentially that could happen and how to prepare. So number 1, you're going to calculate, what would your revenue loss be? This is a really painful thought, but I want you to consider how much per day, if you were closed, how much would you lose, right? And is that per week, per month? And this is the reality, guys. How much per day would I lose if I had to be closed? How much per week? How much per month? Number 2, I want you to calculate how much would you need if you had to rebuild or repurchase your big items. So we're going to use the example of if your van becomes flooded in a storm, right? How much time would you be out of work? And it may be longer than you expect. So the insurance company will first want to know, is your van fixable? Since it's during a time where professionals are also fixing their own places of business, right? You may have to wait 1 to 2 weeks for them to just be operational. I know when we had a flooding situation in Rhode Island where we had this massive surge and it was this giant flood. And I'll never forget, my brother's Jeep was at the mechanics and it took them 1 to 2 weeks to just be able for them to open up, right? So consider that, because they've got to get all those floodwaters to come down if this is a hurricane. And they've also got to clean up their own internal building. Now, if they're just literally a garage, you've got to consider, is their stuff damaged? Are they going to be able to even begin work on these things? And you may be like, okay, well, then I'll just get a tow truck to tow it out of my area. But again, if you've just been through a hurricane and all of that devastation, it's easier said than done. Okay. And then even when you are ready to get into the mechanic, right now, you've got to wait your turn. Depending upon what's going on in your area, there may be other businesses that are ahead of your business. It could be things like hospitals and ambulances and all those things, right? Because a lot of other vehicles may be flooded, right? And if they have deals or membership or whatever, depending upon, if you're going to the Mercedes dealership, you may not be the first person, or the Ford dealership, you may not be the first person in line. So keep that in your own mind, okay? So again, you may have to wait another 1 to 4 weeks after that, right? For them to tell you if your van is totaled, or nope, we can fix this and this, we just need to order these parts, okay? So after that, again, let's say they say it's totaled. Well, now you've got to order your grooming van. And currently, new van turnaround is around 12 weeks. And now remember, the insurance company may also not pay you right away for your van. You may need to come up with your new down payment, or you're going to have to wait until they process all of that and give you your money back. So just to put that in perspective, right? So let's say 1 to 2 weeks where they're getting, everything cleared out on their own. And then let's say you're waiting another 1 to 4 weeks for them to become operational. So we're talking a minimum of about 2 weeks and a maximum of 6 weeks. It's a month and a half just to find out if your van is fixable or not, right? And then after that, if you had to reorder a van, we just went from 2 to 6 weeks, right? And let's say you're going to add another 12 weeks for it to be ordered. Let's say they cut you that check immediately. Okay. Well, then we're looking at a minimum of 14 weeks and a maximum of 20 weeks. 14 weeks, guys, is over 3 months. 3 months of being out of work. And on the high end, 20, right? That's 5 months. It's a long time to be out of work. Number 3, we're going to calculate what won't your insurance cover. It can be very devastating depending upon your insurance will or will not cover, guys. Let's say, let's continue to use the example of the flooded van. So imagine you don't have insurance that will cover flooding, and a lot of you guys don't, right? You don't have an insurance policy that will cover in the event of a flood. So let's say that they're not going to cover the damage done to your vehicle. Okay, but they may or may not cover your time lost out of work. Okay, so you're going to have to figure out how to pay off that van, because if the van is damaged and there is no insurance, you still owe the money for the van. And I think that's really important for people to understand, especially if you have a van, is if there's damage done to your van and that insurance is not covered, it's not like, okay, I'll just throw this van away and go get a new one. No, you still have to pay that loan. And if you have a storefront, guys, if you have an incident where the insurance doesn't cover it, and let's say there is $20,000 or $30,000 damage left to your building, and let's say again you don't have flood insurance and your shop floods, okay? Well, you still have to pay that even if the insurance company won't pay it. So I need you to remember that. That's a big deal. Okay. So, and if you guys do have this van that you have to pay off this loan, right? It can put you in a really tricky spot, okay? Where you might have to go out and take out a loan for that van, even though you have this current loan. And the other thing I want you to consider is if you don't have flood insurance, most insurance companies, and again, I would always contact your company before this happens, so you're not finding out the hard way. But, what I found after Hurricane Ian is I'm getting messages from people that don't have insurances that will cover floods. And because of that, because they're out of work due to a flood, their insurance companies are saying, well, technically, we don't have to pay you for lost wages. This is a very, very big deal, okay? And again, it depends on the way your insurance company is and the way the policies are written. A lot of this stuff is really overwhelming. I am not the person to ask to read over an insurance policy, no more than a legal document. Things are written very specifically, and things we might assume are not always what is there, okay? And it's, again, always better to find out now before a disaster happens than after a disaster. I can't tell you how awful it is when I'm talking to students that have this massive new bill. Not only are they dealing with their personal life, but their business is now up in arms because they have all of these new bills, and their insurance company is like, hey, you didn't pay for this. We can't pay it out. It's not fun. It is really not fun to be there for somebody and be like, yeah, we're going to have to try to either sue that insurance company or try to get additional aid, right? That's not fun. It's not fun for anyone. Okay. So if let's say for instance, they are going to cover that lost wages, we also want to explore, are they going to cover the time from the time of, okay, your van is not fixable, right, to the time that it's going to have a new van that comes in. And again, this is really important, right? Are they going, so if you turn around and say, okay, I need to order this new van, it's going to take 12 or even 20 weeks if it's a custom van. Are they going to pay you for those 12 or 20 weeks? Or are they going to say, yeah, no, the second we decide it's unfixable, we're going to have X amount of weeks. We're going to pay you for 2 weeks after that. We're going to pay you for 5 weeks after that. It's no different than if you said, okay, I'm going to order from this custom company. It's going to take a year to create, right? They might be like, yeah, whoa. Like, that's a little ridiculous. So again, it's easier to find out now than it is if you're ever in that situation. So again, let's say they are going to pay you for those lost wages. What percentage of your wages is the insurance company going to cover? Are they going to cover X amount for X amount of weeks or months, right? How long will that last? Okay. And by the way, is it based upon your take-home salary, or is it based on the business's gross revenue? Okay. And different insurance companies do it different ways. If you don't have employees, let's say that gross business revenue is based on having 5 employees in a shop. Are you still going to get a certain percentage of that? You're going to get that amount, right? Or are they going to be like, well, we're only going to pay you this. Maybe they're only going to pay you the net profit. And so there's so many ways that different insurance companies do it. So it's better to find that out now. And I would love to have an insurance professional come on and really break down the nitty gritty. And this is also why it's really important to have a good dialogue with your insurance company before things happen, right? Because you don't want to find out things the hard way. So number 4, we're going to calculate how much overhead will you need to pay during this period. Again, per day, per week, per month. Remember that you will still have to pay these bills if the insurance has not paid out yet. Your landlord or lien holder, and some car companies or some business companies will give you an emergency like 30, 60, 90-day grace period, but they're going to expect to be paid. It's not forever, okay? And if your business is non-operational for 3 to 6 months, what is that going to look like, guys? If you call during COVID, a lot of people called Mercedes and said, hey, we're shut down. We can't groom. Can you extend our loan? Well, you're still paying that interest payment, or you might be paying an interest only payment, but that's up to them to decide, yes, we're going to let this happen, or no, we're not going to let this happen. And again, if it's a smaller localized event, like a fire or anything like that, it might be, they might be less sympathetic than if it's something national news level, right? So again, it's important to know what kind of leniency they have. So number 5, you're going to go ahead and calculate how much does it you're going to do number 5. You're going to calculate how much will it cost to train or hire new employees. This is kind of a sticky subject. Again, it really depends on how long you guys are out of business, etc. But it's not going to be easy for you guys to figure out exactly how much it's going to cost. But the reality is that you're going to need to get kind of a ballpark idea, because after a natural disaster, there's going to be many people moving out of your area. Homes are going to be destroyed. A lot of things are going to change, whether that's intentional or if it is just a situation where there's nowhere for them to go. Also, if someone deals with something like a hurricane or a brush fire, they may be like, I don't want to live somewhere where I could be hit like a hurricane like this. Or maybe they're like, I don't want to live somewhere where there's tornadoes or earthquakes. We want to just up and move. So I want you to consider how much it's going to cost if you have to get new employees. If there's been devastation, people are going to move. So if your business is also closed for 3 to 6 months, they may need to find new jobs in order to survive. Depending upon your insurance company may pay them out. They may need to file for unemployment. With unemployment, there may be caps on your unemployment. For instance, like in our area where I am now, you have to be unemployed for 2 weeks in order to be able to go on unemployment. And then it's only good for 6 months, and it's a maximum of $600 a week, which sounds like a lot until you realize that $600 a week, if you're a groomer who is bringing home $1,000 a week or $2,000 a week, and $2,000 sounds like a lot, But some of my mobiles that are like really high power groomers are bringing home that kind of money. So you're not going to take a job where you're making half, right? And then a lot of them, for better or worse, if they're like, man, I really have to groom from home while you're closed, which happened during COVID, what's going to happen? They may or may not come back. They may be like, you know what? I like grooming out of my house. This is really fun. So we want to start adding in how much it's going to cost for us to attract new employees or possibly simplify our business to run profitably as a solopreneur. So number 6, we're going to calculate how much is it going to cost for us to market new clients. Just like your employees may choose to relocate to a new area after a natural disaster, the same goes for your clients. Okay, there are plenty of clients that when their house gets demolished, they get that insurance check for the property. And then they can do one of two things. They can either be like, yeah, okay, I'm going to renovate the house. Or they may be like, I'm going to take this money and I'm going to sell the house and let somebody else deal with all the renovations. You know, some people would just rather cut and run. So if that happens, what are you going to do? Okay. And even if your clients don't choose to relocate, if your business has been closed for 3 to 6 months, there's a good possibility that they may have gone somewhere else to get their dogs groomed. Or, you know, their pets may be in such bad conditions that they either learned how to groom for themselves. Not a lot of people do that, but there are those people. You know, it is not easy to get people back in a regular rhythm. Now, in the instance where it's just your business devastated and not just your whole area, you know, it is going to be a lot harder because those people are going to move on. You can't ask people to wait around for 3 to 6 months while you get a new van. That's really difficult. And if you're not grooming somewhere else, right? And even if you are grooming somewhere else, you may or may not be able to provide the same service. Okay. So you need to account for how you're going to attract these new clients when your business is up and running. And for some of you guys, this is going to be a good thing, right? It's going to be an opportunity for you to rebrand, or it's going to give you an opportunity to reevaluate what's really important to you. But either way, it's not something we want to think about. It's not something pleasant to think about. And I know this is a lot of what ifs, but the point is that these exercises is to have the answers now instead of just going, oh, it's never going to happen to me. It's so much easier to make these decisions when you're not in the middle of devastation. You know, it is so much easier to go, okay, if this bad thing happens, I already have my plan in place. I know exactly what I'm going to do. But then you can just deal with the now, which is something horrific, right? And I mean, that's not our goal. Our goal is not, you know, it's kind of like a will, guys. Our goal is not to die. But if you do die, it's good to know what your loved ones and what you will do, right? And I do suggest if you don't have a will that you go ahead and do that. So the Savvy Groomer suggests in a perfect world, you have a minimum of 3 to 6 months and ideally 6 months to a year's worth of money in an account that is your emergency fund. I highly suggest you have one in your personal life and one in your business life. Okay. And we teach this in Personal Finance and a Leash, which is a masterclass where we teach you guys how to get on a personal budget, learn how to work with your money. You know, it really does change your relationship with money. Okay. And the people that went through the price increase masterclass before COVID were not stressed out because they had plenty of money in their accounts to ride out the pandemic. These students had sinking funds to buy things when they ended up being on sale. If anything, COVID really allowed them to either grow their business or, you know, change things in their business for the better. And if you guys are interested in learning more about Personal Finance and a Leash, you can check out that on our website at savvygroomer.com/enroll. So I know this was a really heavy topic and I'm really sorry about that, but I think it's really important. And again, there are so many resources on how to actually create these plans in place. And in the business side, a lot of it is getting really savvy with your personal finances and being prepared that if something does happen, you're not living in a financial house of cards. So thank you guys so much for being here today on this episode of Grow Wealthy Grooming. Be sure to visit us at savvygroomer.com to see any current opportunities to work with me and all of my free resources. You know, if you want to hang out, we can always hang out at the free community on Facebook, which is our Savvy Pet Professionals Facebook group. As always, guys, happy grooming.